When you get older, never visit these four people's homes. It could cost you everything. There's a truth about life that most people won't tell you, not because they want to keep it a secret, but because they learned it the hard way. It's not found in books, nor passed down as gentle advice. It's learned through experience, through betrayal, disappointment, and the realization that some relationships don't just end, they should never be reopened. And here it is. As you get older, no matter how much nostalgia tugs at you, there are certain doors you must never knock on again. Why? Because some wounds should be left to heal. Because not everyone in your past deserves a place in your future. Because one wrong step back into the life of the wrong person can cost you more than you realize. Today, we're going to talk about 4 kinds of people whose homes you should never revisit, even if a part of you is tempted to believe that time has changed things. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why your peace is worth protecting and why some goodbyes should last a lifetime. Stay with me until the end. You may realize you've been holding onto a door that should have been locked long ago. 1. The betrayer. They made their choice. The philosopher Confucius once said, "Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves." But what if revenge isn't about getting even? What if it's about returning to someone who has already proven their loyalty comes at a price? In ancient Rome, there was a senator named Lucius Aelius, once known for his deep friendship with the great general Marcus Agrippa. They had fought side by side, trusted each other with secrets, and dined at the same table. But when political tides shifted, Lucius betrayed Agrippa, aligning himself with his enemies for personal gain. Years later, after much bloodshed and political maneuvering, Lucius found himself isolated, regretting his decision. He sent word to Agrippa, hoping to rekindle their friendship, to explain that it had all been a mistake, an act of survival. Agrippa, a man known for his wisdom, sent a reply with only one line: "A cracked shield will never again stop a blade." Lucius had made his choice. The past could not be undone. His betrayal had revealed his nature, and there was no returning to a bond once shattered. So it is in life. When someone shows you that their loyalty has a price, believe them. No amount of time or longing will restore what was lost. When you've lived as long as I have, you start to see patterns in people. You start to understand that most betrayals don't happen in a single moment. They build quietly, over time, waiting for the right opportunity to reveal themselves. Let me tell you a story about a man named Walter Green, a man I once knew, who learned this lesson too late. Walter was a man of deep loyalty, the kind of man who believed in second chances, who always found a reason to forgive. It was both his greatest virtue and his fatal flaw. His best friend, Henry Tate, had been part of his life since they were boys running barefoot through the dirt roads of Tennessee. They had grown up together, built businesses together, and trusted each other in ways only lifelong friends can. Walter had stood by Henry through thick and thin, even when Henry made reckless decisions, even when he gambled away his savings, even when the whispers around town warned him that Henry wasn't the man he once was. But loyalty is a powerful thing, and Walter believed that friendship, true friendship, was stronger than mistakes. That belief cost him everything. It was in the late summer of 1983 when Walter made the biggest mistake of his life. He trusted Henry with a business deal that involved his entire life savings. Henry had assured him it was foolproof, that they would both walk away rich, that after years of hard work they would finally get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. But one day, Walter woke up to find his bank account emptied, his business gone, and Henry nowhere to be found. He searched, of course, he demanded answers, but deep down he already knew. Henry had never planned on sharing the wealth. For the first time in his life, Walter felt a kind of betrayal that hollowed out his soul. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years, the trust, the brotherhood that had been reduced to nothing more than a transaction. His wife, Martha, tried to console him, tried to tell him that some people were beyond saving, but Walter couldn't accept it. He carried that wound for years, wondering how a friendship so deep could dissolve into nothing. And then, 2 decades later, the phone rang. It was Henry. His voice was weaker now, aged by years of bad decisions. He was sick, alone, and filled with regret. He wanted to see Walter. He wanted forgiveness. Martha, ever the cautious one, warned him, "Walter, the past doesn't change just because someone regrets it." But Walter had never been good at walking away, so he went. He found Henry in a small apartment, barely furnished, with a television playing reruns of old westerns. The man who had once stolen everything from him now had almost nothing to his name, and for a brief moment Walter thought maybe this was justice. Maybe life had corrected the balance. But then Henry spoke. "You know," Henry said, coughing into his sleeve, "I've been thinking about those old days. We were like brothers, weren't we?" Walter nodded. "I was young and stupid," Henry continued. "I never meant to hurt you like that. If I could go back, I'd do it differently." Walter studied him, searching for sincerity in his tired eyes, and for the briefest moment he thought he saw it. But then Henry leaned forward. "You got any work these days?" he asked casually. "Anything I could help out with? Something to get back on my feet?" Walter felt something in his chest tighten. Even after all these years, even after all the regret, the time, the suffering, Henry still saw him as an opportunity, not as a friend, not as a brother, not as a man he had wronged, as an opportunity. Walter stood up, and for the first time in his life, he did something he had never done before. He walked away without looking back. That night, as he sat on his porch with Marta, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she asked him what he was thinking about, and Walter, now a much older and wiser man, simply said, "Some people don't regret what they did. They regret losing access to you." It took him a lifetime to learn that some doors must remain closed, not because he hated Henry, not because he wished him harm, but because once trust is broken, it's not about whether they regret it, it's about whether you can ever afford to let them do it again. I share this story not to tell you what to do, but to offer you a moment of reflection. Have you ever had someone like Henry in your life, someone who broke your trust, disappeared when you needed them most, and then returned as if time alone could erase the past? What did you do? Did you open the door again, or did you finally walk away? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your wisdom, your experiences, they might just help someone else who is struggling with the same decision right now. And if this message resonated with you, consider subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, because at the end of the day, the past may knock, but you get to decide whether or not to answer. 2. The miserable one. They will infect your mind. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "If evil be spoken of you, and it be true, correct yourself. If it is a lie, laugh at it." But what if the negativity isn't about you? What if it's about life itself? What if you are surrounded by people who are convinced that the world has done them wrong, and they want you to feel the same? In American history, President Theodore Roosevelt encountered this mindset often. A man of action, he despised the culture of complaint without effort. During his time in politics, he famously said, "Complaining about a problem without proposing a solution is called whining." He understood that some people, when faced with hardship, seek solutions, while others cling to their misery as if it were a badge of honor. One such case was a man Roosevelt knew well, an old acquaintance who had lost his wealth in a failed investment. Rather than rebuilding, the man spent years blaming others, growing bitter with each passing season. Roosevelt, after years of listening, finally told him, "You have two choices. Spend the rest of your days cursing the wind, or learn how to sail despite it. But know this, the longer you sit still, the deeper you sink." And this is the truth about life. Misery does not want company, it demands it. If you surround yourself with those who refuse to seek solutions, they will never allow you to find your own. Let me tell you about Frank Douglas, a man who nearly lost his future by holding on to the wrong company. Frank was a builder, a fixer, a man who believed in shaping life with his own two hands. He had worked in carpentry since he was a young man, building homes, repairing old barns, and restoring what others had abandoned, but there was one thing he had never been able to fix: his older brother, Eddie. Eddie had been different since they were kids. Where Frank saw possibilities, Eddie saw problems. Where Frank believed in trying, Eddie believed in waiting. He had spent his whole life expecting things to go wrong, so they always did, and as the years went on, their lives became two opposite stories. Frank built a good life, a small business, a home with a wife who loved him, children who looked up to him. Eddie, on the other hand, bounced from one job to the next, never staying long, never satisfied, always blaming someone else. Whenever something went wrong, Eddie had a reason. The economy is rigged, the government is corrupt, people only care about themselves. His words were heavy, the kind of thoughts that settle into your bones if you're not careful. But Frank, being the loyal brother he was, never turned away. He listened, he tried to help, and for a long time he thought he could pull Eddie out of his misery. But misery doesn't work like that. One summer, after a particularly rough year in business, Frank found himself in a tough spot. His company had lost money, his knees were starting to give him trouble, and for the first time he felt a shadow of doubt. So, he did what felt natural. He went to visit Eddie. He sat in his brother's old recliner, staring at the flickering television, and for the first time in his life he felt comfortable there. Not happy, not hopeful, just comfortable. Because sitting in misery, accepting that nothing will ever change, requires no effort at all. For months, Frank started spending more and more time with Eddie. He told himself it was just temporary, that he needed time to rest, to think. But something strange started happening. The way he saw the world began to shift. He started to believe Eddie's words. That dream of yours is unrealistic. The world is too harsh. At your age, why bother? And before he knew it, his ambition, the thing that had built his life, began to disappear. He stopped fixing things around the house, stopped picking up projects, stopped believing that anything could really get better. And then, one day his wife walked in, looked at him, and said something that shook him to his core. "You're starting to sound like him." At first he was angry. How dare she compare him to Eddie? He was nothing like him. He had worked hard all his life. He had built something. But deep down he knew she was right. Eddie's world had become his. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing just how easy it was to become the thing you spend the most time around. The next morning he got up before sunrise, put on his old work boots and walked to his workshop for the first time in months. The smell of sawdust filled his lungs, and in that moment he felt something that had been missing for too long: clarity. That day he made a decision. He went to Eddie's house one last time. He sat across from him, watching as his brother complained about the latest tragedy on the news. And then, before Eddie could finish his sentence, Frank said, "I can't sit here anymore, Eddie. I love you, but I can't be this. Life is what we make of it, and I plan on making mine count." Eddie scoffed, shaking his head. "You always were a fool, Frankie. You still think you can beat the system?" Frank smiled. "No, but I know I can beat myself if I stop trying." And with that, he stood up and left. I tell you this story because I know there are Eddies in your life too. Maybe they are family, maybe they are old friends, maybe they are people you've known for decades. The question is, are they lifting you up or pulling you down? Misery is sneaky. It doesn't always come in loud complaints. Sometimes it comes in the form of small doubts, little discouragements, tiny whispers that make you question whether your efforts even matter. But they do. Your life, your choices, your outlook, these things matter more than you know. So I ask you, have you ever been in Frank's shoes? Have you had to walk away from someone who was drowning in their own negativity? What did you do? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your wisdom, your stories, they might just help someone else who is struggling with the same choice right now. And if this message spoke to you, consider subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, because at the end of the day, some battles aren't ours to fight, but every choice we make shapes the life we live. 3. The one who won't accept your growth. The philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." But the hardest part of growth isn't letting go of who we used to be, it's dealing with those who refuse to let go of that version of us. In the American Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant rose from a struggling, often overlooked soldier to the commanding general of the Union Army. Yet, despite his victories and leadership, many who had known him in his younger years still saw him as the man who had once failed in business and resigned from the army due to drinking rumors. Even as he led the country to victory, some still whispered about his past, refusing to acknowledge the leader he had become. But Grant didn't waste his energy trying to change their minds. He simply moved forward, proving through action, not argument, that a person's past does not define their future. So it is with life. Some will always see you as who you once were, not who you are now. And if you waste time trying to convince them, you may never fully step into the person you were meant to be. Let me tell you a story about Charles Boone, a man who learned the hard way that some people will never let go of the past, even when you've left it behind. Charles grew up in a small town in West Virginia where everyone knew each other's history, that kind of place where your reputation wasn't just yours, it belonged to the whole town, whispered about in barbershops and grocery store aisles. And Charles had a past. He had been reckless in his youth, fights, bad decisions, and a drinking problem that nearly cost him his life. He had burned bridges, hurt people, and earned himself a name that followed him everywhere. But one day, after waking up in a ditch on the side of the road with no memory of how he got there, he decided he was done. Charles quit drinking, found work, and started rebuilding. It wasn't easy. The first few years were brutal. But he kept going, one step at a time, until finally he was a new man. Or at least, he thought he was. Until he realized that not everyone was willing to see him that way. No matter how much time passed, people still talked about the man he used to be. Old friends at the local bar would laugh when they saw him and say, "Come on, Charlie, one drink won't kill you. Don't act like you're better than us." Neighbors would glance at him with quiet suspicion, as if at any moment he might relapse and become the town disgrace again. Even his own family didn't fully believe he had changed. His older brother Jim had always been the responsible one, the one who cleaned up Charles's messes, bailed him out, and stood in his shadow of chaos for years. And now that Charles was finally standing on his own 2 feet, Jim didn't know what to do with him. One Thanksgiving, as they sat around the table, Jim raised a glass and smirked. To Charlie, who by some miracle actually managed to stay out of trouble for a whole year. "Never thought I'd see the day," the room laughed. But Charles didn't. Because he realized something at that moment. No matter what he did, no matter how hard he worked, to them, he was still the screw-up. For a long time, Charles tried to prove them wrong. He bent over backward, working harder, helping people, showing up to every family event, thinking that if he just did enough, eventually they would see him as the man he had become. But they never did. Until one day, he met an old man named Thomas Miller, a retired pastor who had moved to town a few years back. Thomas had seen him at church a few times and noticed how Charles carried himself, like a man who was always apologizing for something. One evening after a service, he pulled Charles aside and said something he never forgot. "Son," he said, "you're standing in a room too small for you." Charles frowned. "What do you mean?" Thomas smiled. "Some people will always see you as who you were, not because you haven't changed, but because if they accept that you've grown, they have to question why they haven't." And that was the moment Charles realized the truth. He had spent years trying to prove himself to people who had no intention of ever seeing him differently. And the worst part? He had let their perception of him dictate how he saw himself. Not long after that, Charles made a decision. He stopped explaining himself. He stopped apologizing for things he had already made right. And most importantly, he stopped letting the past hold him hostage. He moved to a nearby town, started fresh, and built a life where he wasn't defined by his worst moments. And for the first time in years, he felt free. I tell you this story because I know many of you have felt the same weight Charles did. You've changed, you've grown, you've worked hard to become someone better, but there are still people who refuse to see it. Maybe it's an old friend who keeps bringing up the past. Maybe it's family members who still treat you like the person you used to be. Maybe it's even your own mind, replaying old mistakes that no longer define you. But hear me when I say this. You are not who you were yesterday, and anyone who refuses to acknowledge your growth does not deserve access to your present. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone who wouldn't accept the person you've become? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your words may just help someone who is struggling with the same decision right now. And if this message spoke to you, consider subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, because at the end of the day, you don't have to convince anyone that you've grown, you just have to live in a way that proves it. 4. The one who resents your success. The Greek philosopher Aristotle once wrote, "The envious are pained by their friend's success." But what makes envy dangerous isn't just the pain, it's the way it poisons relationships, turning admiration into quiet resentment. In American history, Abraham Lincoln faced this firsthand. As he rose from a humble background to become one of the most respected leaders in history, he noticed how some old friends turned cold, unable to accept that the man they once knew as a small-town lawyer had outgrown them. Lincoln understood that success doesn't just change the person who achieves it, It forces those around them to question their own choices. One such acquaintance, a man named Joshua Speed, once said to him, "Abe, you used to be just like us, but now, you're aiming too high." Lincoln's response was simple but profound. "The only thing that has changed is my willingness to stop doubting what I am capable of." And this is the truth. When you grow beyond what others expected of you, some will see it as inspiration, while others will see it as an accusation, and those who resent you will do everything in their power to bring you back down. Let me tell you about Daniel Carter, a man who learned that sometimes success doesn't just reveal who you are, it reveals who your true friends are. Daniel grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone's life looked more or less the same. People married young, worked hard, and stayed in the same circles their whole lives. And for a while, Daniel believed that was his path too. But he was different. He had dreams too big for his surroundings. While his friends were content working in the local factory, Daniel wanted more. He wanted to build something, create something, be something more than what people expected. So against the advice of almost everyone he knew, he left. He moved to New York, started working at a small company, and within a decade, he had built his own business from the ground up. He wasn't just doing well, he was thriving. And that's when the calls started coming. Old friends who hadn't spoken to him in years suddenly reached out. Some were happy for him, but some weren't. At first it was small things, subtle comments, little jabs hidden behind jokes. "Must be nice, Dan. Some of us are still stuck in the real world. You changed, man. You're not like you used to be. Don't forget where you came from." At first, he laughed it off. They didn't mean any harm, right? But the more he succeeded, the worse it got. One day he visited home hoping to catch up with his best friend from childhood, Eric. Eric had always been like a brother to him. They had dreamed big together as kids, talked about escaping their small town and making something of themselves. But Eric never left, and when Daniel walked into their old bar that night, he saw it in his friend's eyes, the resentment. They sat down, ordered drinks, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But then Eric leaned back in his chair and smirked. "So, you're some big-shot businessman now, huh?" Daniel chuckled. "I wouldn't say that, but yeah, things have been good." Eric swirled his drink. "Must be nice." Daniel sighed. "Eric, if you wanted to do something different, you still could. It's not too late." But Eric shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? You left, Dan. You got out. The rest of us? We're still here. And every time we see you, every time we hear about you, it's like a reminder that we never did anything." Daniel didn't know what to say. Eric wasn't mad that Daniel had succeeded. He was mad that he hadn't. And in that moment, Daniel realized something painful. His success had cost him a friendship. Not because he had changed, but because Eric refused to. That night, Daniel made one last attempt. "Eric, I would have taken you with me, you know that. But you never wanted to go." Eric sighed. "I know, but that doesn't make it any easier." Daniel nodded, finished his drink, and stood up. For years he had held on to their friendship, hoping that one day Eric would be happy for him. But some people don't want to grow. They just want you to stop growing. So, for the first time in his life, Daniel walked away from someone who refused to walk with him, and he never looked back. I tell you this story because I know many of you have felt what Daniel felt. You've worked hard, you've built something, you've changed. And somewhere along the way, someone who once loved you stopped celebrating you and started resenting you. Maybe it was an old friend, maybe a family member, maybe even a spouse. And the painful truth is this: not everyone in your past is meant to be in your future. So I ask you, have you ever had someone in your life who resented your success? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your wisdom might help someone who is struggling with this same reality right now. And if this message spoke to you, consider subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Because at the end of the day, true friends will clap for you when you win, and the ones who don't, they were never really for you to begin with. Some doors are meant to stay closed, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but because not everyone deserves a place in the life you've worked so hard to build. Some people were part of your journey, but they are not meant to be part of your destination. And that's okay. You do not owe anyone access to your life, especially those who have shown you time and time again that they don't value it. Your peace, your growth, your future, they are worth protecting. So if this message spoke to you, take a moment to reflect. Have you been holding on to people who no longer belong in your story? Have you been knocking on doors that only lead back to pain? If so, maybe it's time to step forward without looking back. And if you resonate with this, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, because your wisdom might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need it, because at the end of the day, your best years are still ahead of you. Don't let the past keep you from living them.